Each in his own way taught us retriever training, handling, field trial etiquette, and mechanics. An important part of being the professional was the excellent support teams that included a special lady who threw birds for us, helped us keep our sense of humor, and allowed us to infringe on their private lives. Our appreciation goes out not only to the professionals, but also to the support teams, Mary Lou, Beulah Jean, Carolyn, Virgie, and Dutch. In the early 60s, Bob Chance was introduced to hunting by some colleagues at the DuPont Corporation. Needing a dog, he bought a pup named Black Rebel. Both he and his wife, Mary Lou, joined the Port Arthur Retriever Club. Bob's most memorable experience was winning his first amateur stake and receiving the King Buck Award. After training Rebel from the top Derby list to his championship, Bob and Mary Lou decided to turn pro. In the early 70s, they opened Chance's R Kennels in Beaumont, Texas, which they ran until 1986. Bob trained many trial dogs, among them field champion and amateur field champion Shyster of Lamar, field champion, amateur field champion Waccama's Highwood Rock, and field champion Texas Star. Bob died on July 21st, 1990, age 54. An avid duck hunter, Rufus Deskins purchased his first retriever in 1956. 3 days later, he happened to see a picnic trial and became an active member of the North Texas Retriever Club. In 1964, Rufus and his wife, Beulah Jean, purchased a farmhouse and 27 acres of land, which had a tiny lake perfect for training retrievers. In 1966, Rufus gave up his engineer career to open Deerskin Kennels, which over the years produced many field champions. Seeing a need for well-made dog carriers, Rufus started Deerskin Trailers, which sons Kenny and Andy now run as Deerskin Manufacturing. As president of the PRTA in the mid-70s, Rufus was instrumental in launching the organization's own licensed field trial. Rufus passed away on October 6, 1992. Abel Delaune was an engineer for radio station WWL in New Orleans when a friend gave him a Labrador. Abel had never trained a dog before, but he did so well that before long he was training dogs for friends. Eventually he quit radio and, as he put it, went to the dogs. Abel was a full-time trainer until 1986, when he returned to radio, this time as the owner of his own station. Abel was one of the founders of the South Louisiana Retriever Club. Abel's wife, Virgie, says one of his proudest moments was placing first with River Road Bippy and second with VNC Chip in the Open at the East Texas Retriever Club's first licensed trial. Abel died on October 7, 1992. The first dog Floyd Hayes trained was Girl of Reelfoot. Named for the lake near his Tennessee hometown, Floyd had a special talent with young dogs. He opened his first kennel in 1956. In 1960, he and his wife Carolyn moved to Katy, Texas, where they opened Hayes Kennels. Among some of the dogs Floyd helped train were FC Bucks Hobo, owned by Hank Bronner, FC Alamo Black Jack, owned by Noxie Romano, and field champion and amateur field champion Old Yella, a black male owned by Cactus Pryor. Floyd's proudest moment was when Don Weiss won the 1970 National Open with field champion, amateur field champion Creole Sister, a retriever Floyd had trained from a young dog to her national title. Floyd passed away in May of 1988. Retriever training was a family affair with Willard Higgs and his wife, Benita May, better known as Dutch. My professional bird throwers is how Willard used to jokingly refer to Dutch and their son, Butch. After competing in the National Amateur Trials in 1959, the Higgs decided they would go professional. In his first year as a pro, Willard qualified for the National Open with Dandy Dan of Repman. It was anything but beginner's luck. For 21 years, Willard and his family set a standard for field trial excellence. Willard died on January 29, 1993.
people in this sport are, by and large, just wonderful people. There's no money to win. It's just the dog. I mean, you know, recognition for the dog. It's a great sport.
These people enjoyed their dogs, and they'd come out on a weekend, and there was, you know, it wasn't who won what. Everybody had a good time. They had lunches out on the end gate of the station wagons and a few drinks. The owners did.
Yeah, it's a combination of a lot of things. I look back, directly or indirectly, it's permitted me to travel this country in virtually every state. It's got me to Alaska a couple of times. It's got me hunting in Yucatan a couple of times, directly or indirectly with the dogs. So I've made an awful lot of good friends. Maybe a few of them that don't like me too well, but we had a lot of fun anyway.
The 1995 Professional Trainers Association field trial was held at Pilot Point, Texas. Professional retriever trainers are unique. Many have dedicated their lives to maintaining the highest of standards and sportsmanship. Most are wise enough to know that winning is important, but should be mixed with camaraderie, respect, and admiration of fellow competitors. An old-timers reunion features a special roundtable discussion to honor the pioneers who brought greatness to the sport of field trialing. Wayne Crook started training dogs in California in 1953. Roy Gagne taught him the basics and to learn the rest on his own. AFC Tago Pat was the first dog Wayne titled. Both Wayne and Pat were finalists in their first amateur national. He opened his first kennel in Pescadero, California in 1963. There, Wayne and his son Chuck qualified and ran many open nationals. In 1976, Wayne and his wife Donna moved to Veneta, Oklahoma, where they opened Crook's Kennels. In 1995, Wayne and Donna celebrated their 65th wedding anniversary. 42 years after his first lesson, Wayne is still training and running dogs. No one taught Leroy Crowshaw dog training. He just taught himself. He started Royal Kennels in Fremont, Nebraska in 1952. Over the years, Leroy has had many outstanding dogs and many warm memories. His proudest moment was when he won his first open stake and ran his first open national with field champion Jamie's Little Tiger in 1972. A dog handler for 43 years, Leroy is still training, still learning, and still doing the work he loves. Melanie Dennicus obedience trained her first dog, a Springer Spaniel, when she was 11 years old. Her love of dogs never left her, and she opened her first training kennel in 1962 in Peoria, Illinois. In 1980, Melanie moved to Texas and opened Double M Kennels in Flint. She now trains only by electric collar, and since 1987, only for hunt test. Melanie has titled 50 hunt test dogs and has run in 3 Master Nationals. Roger Riopel started training Springer Spaniels in Minneapolis, Minnesota. In 1935, he paid $5 for his first retriever, the best dog he says he ever had. In 1952, he bought Yankee Clipper as a 6-week-old puppy. Yankee went on to become field champion, amateur field champion, and won the Canadian National in 1957. 2 years later, Roger turned professional, opening Rio Raj Kennels, where he trained and handled field champion, amateur field champion My Rebel. For many years, he did his winter training in Texas with fellow pros Tony Berger and Charlie Morgan. Roger retired as a professional in 1975, but continues to train and run dogs, among them FC-AFC Ironwood Tornation. He's also still looking for another $5 bargain. Joe Reiser started training pointers and retrievers in Michigan in the early 50s. He moved to Long Island, New York, and worked for several years as a private trainer for Roger Vasile. In 1957, Joe went to work for George Murnane Sr. at Macoupin Kennels. After the departure of Murnane's private trainer, Joe Schumer, he assumed management and handling of the Murnane dogs. While at Macoupin, he won 3 Open Nationals. Field champion Wygen Cox Coot in 1966 and 1969, and Mike Chris Saylor in 1971. After Macoupin closed in 1969, Joe and his wife Joan moved to Covington, Georgia, where they opened Reiser Kennels. Health problems forced Joe to retire in 1975, although he keeps a keen interest in training and running retrievers. Joe Schumer was a game warden before he answered his true calling and went to work as a private trainer for George Murnane Sr. in 1953. During the 10 years he ran Murnane's Macoupin Kennels, Joe won 2 Open National Championships with field champion Spirit Lake Duke in 1957 and 1959. In 1963, Joe moved to Lincoln, Nebraska to open Schumer Kennels, where he trained 1972 Open National Field Champion Royal Moose's Moe, owned and handled by Bill Connors. In 1971, Joe moved to Texas. Joe has trained many good dogs, including High Point Open Golden Field Champion Macoupin Maxim and FC-AFC Big Stone Flint. Joe retired in 1987 and now lives in Nebraska. Jim Swann started his training career in April 1966, working for Tommy Sorensen, and later worked for Floyd Hayes. In 1968, Jim and his wife Marcia moved to Tennessee to manage Ripshin Kennels. In 1970, they moved to the Dallas, Texas area, where they opened Swann Kennels. Jim has trained and run many memorable dogs, including FC Your Shot Minnesota Fats, FC-AFC True Marks Raider, FC-AFC Volwood's Rough and Ready, and FC-AFC Hunter's March Oddie. One of Jim's most enjoyable experiences was giving a training seminar in Australia. He has run numerous Open Nationals and titled many field champions. His most memorable experience was at the Tallahassee Field Trial in 1968, where he qualified for his first Open National and took all 4 places in the Derby with littermates. Although Jim no longer travels, he continues to train field trial and hunting dogs. Jay Sweezie started as an amateur in 1948 and turned professional in 1950. In 1953, he went to work as a private trainer for Henry Sears in Chestertown, Maryland. In 1961, Jay opened his own business, Double Creek Kennels. Jay has won over 160 open stakes and finished 40 field champions. Some of his more memorable dogs were FC Cutty Sark, FC Zippers Dee-Doo, and FC Zippers Dapper Sapper. For many years, Jay wintered in South Carolina, trialed on the East Coast with fellow pros Vance Morris, Buddy Hedges, and Ray Stoniger. Still an active trainer, Jay now winters in Texas near his son Kent. Billy Voight started training dogs in 1963, working with the renowned Charlie Morgan until he opened his own kennel, Hunt Trails in Michigan. Billy trained many dogs, including National Derby champion Big Stone Flint. The peak of his career was training Mike Flannery's Labrador River Oaks Corky, the high point dog of all time. Field champion and national amateur field champion, Canadian national champion Corky earned 301.5 open points and 306.5 amateur points. Billy and his wife Diana now live in Lafayette, Colorado, where Billy has retired from training. It's hard to follow a dog like Corky. D.L. Walters grew up in a dog training family. His parents owned Walters Kennels, and D.L. has been training dogs since he could walk. He started training on his own in 1940. Over a long and successful career, he has won 2 national opens, the first in 1962 with FC-AFC Big Stone Hope, and again in 1967 with FC-AFC Butte Blue Moon. both owned by Bing and Brownie Grunwald. D.L. and his wife, Ann, edited the book Charlie Morgan on Retrievers, and later authored their own book, Training Retrievers to Handle. D.L. was inducted into the Retriever Hall of Fame in 1994. William Billy Wunderlich trained his first dog in 1937. He ran his first trial in 1938, winning the Derby and qualifying with the same dog. During World War II, Billy served in the Army Canine Corps. After the war, he worked as a private trainer for numerous clients, later opened North Oaks Kennel. Billy won 2 National Open Championships. In 1951 with field champion Ready Always of Marion Hill, owned by M.B. Wallace Jr. In 1958 with field champion Nilo Possibility, owned by K.K. Williams. Now retired, Billy and his wife Kurt live in Montana, but keep an active interest in retrievers and those who train them. In 1994, Billy was inducted into the Retriever Hall of Fame. Roger Riopel, how long have you been in the dog business?
Too long.
I imagine a lot of your competitors have said that many times.
I'm sure. But I just want to tell you this. I was the first, to begin with, my dad was a hunter, and he had an old Irish rat-tail water spaniel, which you don't see anymore. And anyhow, stupid damn dog, but I got to be 17, 18 years old, and I bought a Springer Spaniel. It wasn't worth a damn for duck hunting in northern Minnesota. And anyhow, in in the early 30s, they started having trials out east, 31. And I used to buy Sports Afield and Field and Stream and read all this stuff about these great Labradors, you know. 35, I bought one. 37, we had the first licensed trial in the state of Minnesota. I can remember Wunderlich, when he came out there, dressed up like a dude with these jodhpur pants and all this and that and the other. You were there, weren't you, Billy?
Be careful.
Well, I had labs. I could never get them out of the damn qualifying stake even, so that's how stupid I was with the dogs. I don't know. But after World War II, I finally run across a little dog and made me famous. I didn't make him. He made, well, not famous, but anyway, I've enjoyed the game.
Both were famous.
What was that dog?
Yankee Clipper.
Well, it's practically all men. The professionals were all men. And yet they were all so encouraging and so helpful, and one of the things that impressed me so much about the sport as a whole, but the professionals especially, were the way they tried so hard to help you, even on the days that you were competing against them.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you talk and discuss training procedures and whatnot on a Thursday, and on Friday go out and try to beat them. But they still would help you on those days. And that was very impressive to me, and it was a major part of my interest, as well as the dogs, of course.
The first club was the Golden Retriever Club of Texas.
And that was based where?
Well, it was actually guys from around LaPorte, Houston, and we got in it from one of the boys in Port Arthur that had a Golden.
Mm-hmm.
That saw Willard training these dogs and asked him to come to the field trial.
Mm-hmm.
And it was held in Silsbee. Most of the trials were held up around Silsbee, Texas at that time. And there was a pro named Peveril that was there that was helping the boys. And believe me, field trials were not like field trials today. I mean, if your dog didn't go get the blind, well, you're allowed 3 rocks.
3 rocks?
3 rocks.
To hit the dog with?
To get the dog to the blind. You know, it's this sort of thing. But Willard and this other fellow, there was about 3 or 4 of the guys that had dogs that would train and work to the whistle. Mm-hmm. That was originally where it started.
And then when did the pros start coming to Texas to train in the winter?
Well,
After we started.
it was, first deal, and I started in Kansas. I talked Mr. Murnane and let me come south and train so I could get in some real good training. And we'd meet in Council Bluffs at his house, and I also used to live there. And then we went on down to Kansas, and we'd train in Sharon, Kansas, deal.
we walked in, right? We were going to have breakfast in a truck stop across the road. We're off the turnpike, but this particular company had the service for the turnpike. So Ray said, let's check on that car. I said, okay. So we go in, and there's a guy in there with, you know, he's got a kind of washed out looking pair of Levi's on and a horn-rimmed glasses, and he has a pair of hush puppies on, and he's bouncing around here, there, and yonder, and our car, or Raymond's car, is no longer number one in line, it's now number two. There's a Cadillac Coupe de Ville, late vintage, and a little teardrop-shaped trailer behind it. And they're all waiting on this man, hand and foot. I mean, they're just doing everything they can. They're bringing coffee to him and donuts and everything. So anyway, Ray said, who is this SOB? I said, I don't know. He said, how the hell they pushed us back? They haven't touched our car. They're waiting on him. I said, Raymond, I don't know. So I'm walking around looking at these broke-down cars, you know, from the turnpike. So pretty soon I hear him say, he said, what kind of dogs do you have? He said, you have show dogs? And Ray was quite annoyed and quite surly. He said, nah. So he said, well, they stage dogs? Ray said, nah, they're field trial dogs. What do you do? He said, I play the Lone Ranger on television. Well, I grabbed my side and fell over the hood on a broke-down car because I heard him say it. So here comes Raymond over to me. He said, did you hear that SOB? I said, indeed I did, Ray. He said, you think he's a Lone Ranger? I said, I can't tell you. The guy wears a mask.
I met Cotton in 1938 at his first field trial in Winona, Minnesota. So we were training dogs together and been together quite often. And Cotton had there were at that time very few dog trainers, Frank Hogan, Dave Elliott, and Cotton. And of course, I was pretty much of a kid compared to these boys then. And I remember staying at the Brown Deer. Back in those days, we stayed in small hotels, no motels, and staying in the Brown Deer Hotel in Brown Deer, Wisconsin. And of course, those days, and DL can tell you about some of them, these owners really knew how to play and play well. And I woke up in the morning and I didn't have one stitch of clothes in my room. They had gotten in there. The only clothes that I had on was my shorts and my tops and a pair of shoes. I did have a pair of rain gear. I put on the rain gear. I was one of the first dogs to be on line, and I went out there and I ran those dogs in my rain gear. I had nothing. They had stolen every bit of clothes that I had out of that room. And that was one of Cotton Purcell's tricks.
Well, I remember one time, I think it was Schumer and I went walking by, and Oscar was getting out of this cab, and he had about 6 duffel bags. Schumer said, gee, Oscar, says, you bring a lot of luggage to a field trial. And Oscar turned around and looked at him and said, this ain't luggage. He said, this is money I bring to DL every month.
What was your best dog?
Well, the best performing dog, the one that I thought the most of was the first one I ever owned.
Which was?
Was a dog that I got him just for hunting, and I didn't know one end of a dog from another. And he come down out of a dog they used to call Little Pierre, pretty well-bred dog. I had him in Alaska because I couldn't get out there in them swamps and get to his geese when I'd get them. In fact, I went to the tule pads that float, and I got out on them once, and I broke through, and if I hadn't had a shotgun, I think I'd have still been up there. I fell across the hole and kept me from, I crawled out on my stomach, so I went and got me a Labrador to get those geese out of there. And I called him Tall Pat, and he was something else.
Yeah.
He didn't do much in the field trial, although the first national I ever saw, I run him in an amateur national, and I competed with the rascal. Mm-hmm. And we didn't actually know what we were doing down there, so he had to be a pretty good dog.
Tell us about Abel's philosophy of training.
Well, Abel was not one who had a lot of philosophy. He loved dogs and he loved training, and so that's what he did. Someone gave him a dog. That's how we got started in it. And he did such a good job that other people were asking him to take their dogs, and so he was in radio at that time, and finally he decided he'd rather be with the dogs, as he liked to say, he went to the dogs. And we did that from, now guess what, 1960 until 1981. Then we decided to go back to radio, or rather he decided to go back, that we were going back to radio, so that's what we did. And he passed away in 92.
Dog training is radio now, transmitter and receiver.
That's like the rest of the story, Paul Harvey.
Yeah.
That's right. I've been fortunate. The dogs have made me what I have done, and this and that and the other. I've had a lot of great friends. I just want to say, I've run trials. You're not going to believe it. Very few people have run trials from Fairbanks, from Anchorage, Alaska to Florida, from Maine to California, from British Columbia to Eastern Ontario. So I've covered the Northern Hemisphere pretty good with these damn dogs.
And that
But
was
I've
just 1
enjoyed
month.
How old are you, Roger, may we ask?
He was at the
Well,
USA, but it took
you
6.
can ask, but I'll be 82 May the 8th.
You'll be 82.
Yeah.
Well, are you still dogging?
You damn right, and I'm going to do it till I die.
We have a room, a big room. There's a library, there's a office, and there's a big room for the bird dogs in the museum part. Also some retrievers in the museum. Now we just finished another part of the building last year, which is strictly the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's dogs or people that were actually elected that room. And now we're trying to promote another room, which will be strictly for educational, kids coming through, seeing how different breeds of dogs have gone into this part of the world. Meeting room, that will be one separate room, which we're trying to, get enough money to put together and have that room in place. I might add that they're now working on Springer Spaniels to get them. And so what Gary Lockheed is trying to do is put all the sporting dogs together, whether they're pointing dogs, spaniels, retrievers, whatever, hounds, so forth. And it's a thing that I personally think something that should be talked about and should be supported.